Parshat Acharei describes Kedusha, describes holiness, as the product of limitation and specialness and uniqueness. In the memorable words of the Yiddish writer Shai Ansky, God's world is huge and holy. The holiest land in the world is the Holy Land. In the Holy Land, the holiest city is Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, the holiest site was the temple. And in the temple, the holiest place of all was the Holy of Holies. Now, there are 70 nations in the world. The holiest nation is the people of Israel. And of the 12 tribes of Israel, the holiest of all the tribes is Levi. And of the tribe of Levi, the holiest men are the priests. Of all the priests, the holiest was the high priest. Now, there are 354 days in the year, and some of them are holy days. The holiest of these days are the Sabbaths, and the holiest Sabbath of all is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the Sabbath of Sabbaths. Now, there are 70 languages in the world, and the holiest of them all is the Holy Tongue, Hebrew. And the holiest Hebrew of all is the Hebrew of the Holy Torah, and the holiest part of the Torah is the Ten Commandments, and in the Ten Commandments, the holiest word of all is the Shem Havayah, the name of God. And once a year, at a specific moment, the four holiest holies in the world used to join together. That was on Yom Kippur, when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies and uttered the Shem Mefurash, the complete and ineffable name of God, the Tetragrammaton, the four letters Yud Kei Vav Kei. And because that moment was immeasurably holy and fearful, it was the most dangerous for both for the high priest and for the entire Jewish people. For if at that moment, God forbid, a sinful thought had come to the high priest, an impure thought, a machshava zara, then the world would have been destroyed. This is Ansky's poetic, dramatic portrayal of the events that are described at the very beginning of Parshat Acharei. V'yom Hashem Moshe, Deber Aaron, speak to Aaron, Achicha, to your brother. Ve'al yavo b'chol eit el hakodesh. He can't go at any time into the sanctuary. Mibeit leparochet. He can't pass beyond the curtains, lest he die. If I appear in the cloud over the cover, God's presence is concentrated above the cover of the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies. And so access to that sacred place is limited, even to someone as sacred as Aaron HaKohen. And so the Torah goes on and delineates the ritual of Yom Kippurim, by which Aaron was, and later Kohanim Godolim, later generations of high priests, could enter into this inner sanctum. Those of us who've been learning Daf Yomi have learned about the preparations that were necessary before any high priest could go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. But then in Parshat Kedoshim, the second of our double portions, the Torah speaks about holiness in a very different way. Deber kol adat b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem, say to them, Kedoshim to you, you shall be holy, ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeinu, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And here holiness is not the province of the Beis HaMikdash. It's not the responsibility of the priests. It's not something to strive for and attain on Yom Kippur. Holiness instead is an obligation for all of us. Each one of us has to strive for holiness. And that can be understood in at least two ways. It could be that the mitzvot of the Torah, in all of their variety and diversity, are the means by which we attain holiness. Rashi understands the Torah in this way. And the mitzvot of Parshat Kedoshim are perhaps the most diverse and varied of all, in no particular order, as if to emphasize the fact that each and every mitzvah is an opportunity for holiness, and the whole package has to fit together in a way that creates a holy society. Whereas each individual mitzvah on its own may not make sense, may clash with some other value, may be dissonant in some way. All together, the big picture, all of us observing these mitzvot together, the ritual mitzvot, the interpersonal mitzvot, the ethical mitzvot, all of them together create holiness. Ramban, however, takes us one step further. For Ramban, the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihiyu is an obligation to strive for holiness when there is no mitzvah telling us what to do. We have 613 case studies. We have 613 examples of what God wants us to do in 613 specific situations. And the job of a Jew is to learn from those 613 cases so that we can strive for holiness effectively in the 614th case and the 615th case, and onward to infinity. And that's what striving for holiness can mean. This is the opposite of how Ansky describes the Kohen Gadol going into the Kodesh Kedoshim on Yom Kippur and speaking the sacred, ineffable name of God. That's about a limited person in a limited time in a limited space. Whereas Kedoshim to you is saying holiness is our perpetual, unending responsibility. It's a goal that we always strive for at every moment of our lives, when we're fulfilling a mitzvah and when there is no mitzvah telling us what to do. This is a much heavier burden, but I hope it's a much more inspiring message for what a life of Torah and mitzvot can be about. Okay, our goals are really high. Our ambitions are really, really high, but I think the reward is really great because we're striving for holiness. And we're striving for a life in which every moment, in which every interaction, in which every space has the capacity to be transformed into something truly, truly sacred. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.